Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Finish More Music podcast. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Alan Oldham, aka DJ T-1000, a man who's been involved in the techno scene for many years, has been an absolute building block in the history, the shaping of the music, part of the seminal techno outfit Underground Resistance, and is still at the top of the game now, producing and releasing up-to-date techno records and playing in his current hometown of Berlin in all of the clubs. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us on the show, Alan.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, there's so much I want to dive into creativity and sort of the culture of techno and all of those good things. As a big fan of techno music myself, and listen to your live sets and your records, and you're seeing your streams and so on YouTube at the moment. But what I wanted to start with is something that maybe people don't know about you. They'll be familiar with you as a DJ and as a producer and even a label owner, but they may not know that you're also a prolific visual artist. So I think my first question has to be really the relationship between the two, which came first, that really your history as a creative, if you can kickstart there for us, please.
All right. Well, just to keep the story short, I started out as an illustrator, an artist. I originally wanted to be a comic artist, and I actually had a comic out in the 80s, like a black and white indie comic. Myself and a friend of mine did, and it was at that point I was in college and I was drawing, making this. And back in those days, you could publish indie comics and actually make money from them, and the distribution was really good and whatnot. And I was doing this while I was in school, and I had a parallel track of wanting to go into radio. The original thing was, the art was kind of a hobby, and the radio was going to be the real career. That was the idea. And so I was at Wayne State University, was the name of my college, and I was taking radio, TV, film classes. That was my major, and then I was drawing on the side, and that's basically how that worked. So I started out as an artist, and I was always an artist. And then kind of techno came along sideways, and then I got into techno. So, but I still do illustrations and paintings, and I've had gallery shows and art happenings, everywhere over the past maybe 10 years. So yeah, that's kind of a parallel career for me.
So it's been a real creative, a calling to creativity for you from a very young age, and one that you've leaned into and made it a great career out of, and get to dip into both of those disciplines, which is great. Yeah. So what I'd be super fascinated in is the similarities or not between your creative processes. So like how you go about creating a piece of visual art and how you go about, for example, producing a record. So if maybe we start on the production side of things, what's the very beginning of that look like? Is there a predetermined idea before you go into the studio, or you make your own inspiration? What would the typical kicking off point be when you're about to write a new track?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, for me, is that you kind of have to build up the resolve to do it. That's like in anything, it's like you just have to build up this internal head of steam and say, okay, I'm going to do this today. I'm actually going to sit down and do it. Because the thing with me is, I kind of procrastinate sometimes and let stuff go too long. But the key is to just get a hold of that and say, you know what, I'm gonna do this today. I'm gonna start something today, and it doesn't even matter what it is, but you're gonna start something and accomplish something that day. It just seems to me as time goes on, I mean, time is getting more and more. It's becoming more and more important. So every day you have to do something. I think, like something. It doesn't have to be any particular thing. It just has to be something has to be accomplished during the day, whether it's art, music, paying your bills, just some junk that you put off. I mean, something's got to happen. every day. That's kind of the attitude going in. It depends. Like if I have a client that wants music by a certain deadline or art by a certain deadline, that's always a motivating factor. I mean, for me, deadlines and paydays are like the big motivating factor for me. It's like, okay, because if I don't have to do nothing, I won't, you know. But if something is really, if I really want to sink my teeth into something, I can move. So yeah, motivation is a really big part of everything. That just starts the whole process off. Musically, in terms of production, the funny thing is I go in with something in my head and it never comes out that way. Like you go in with a particular sound that you want to do, and then you're kind of scrolling through presets and you don't have anything that sounds like what's in your head, and then you kind of want to sample something or you want to take something and tweak it, and it never, the joke with me is that I would go in wanting to make like a hypnotic techno track, but everything comes out Detroit, no matter what. Oh, I'm going to make an industrial techno track today. Oh, sounds like Detroit. Oh, I want to make today. I'm going to make like I said, hypnotic techno, like the kids are making now. They're making this hypnotic techno now. It's almost like DJ tools are back, 20 years later. So you go in, I want to make a hypnotic techno track, and then it sounds like Detroit. It sounds like Kevin Saunderson or something. It's like I just can't I can't shake it. So I just kind of lean into it, I guess.
So it's a case of building up the head of steam to start with, whatever it is, whether it's you're going to sit down and draw a piece of art, or whether it's a track that you're going to write. It's building yourself up to start, and then in the music, it's sometimes an idea. Other times you're going just, I wonder what happens if.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it. Because it starts out an idea, but then it just kind of goes off the rails along the way, and then it comes out the way it comes out.
And is that the same for your visual art, assuming that you're not doing something that's very specifically commissioned, for example?
No, the visual art is better because I'm not. It all comes from my head, so it can come out the way I want it. But when you deal with kind of the random elements of production, it takes on a life of its own. You know what I mean? The art doesn't take on a life of its own because I actually can make it look the way I want it to look. But the music takes on a life of its own because maybe your sound palette, you don't have the sound palette that you need in order to do this or that, or it's just it. And then you have it so like you have a portamento and the notes will drift, or like let's just say you lay down a pattern and then you quantize the pattern, and then when the pattern quantizes, it's completely different from what you lay down, but it's good, but it's always kind of random elements in the musical aspect. There's more control in the art aspect, design totally. Materials and
so I guess there's more uncertainty that comes about in the music production process, and it's just you and your, I don't know, pencil or whatever it is that you're using to draw. Mm-hmm. There's not all these other gadgets and bits and pieces to deal with. So that to me, I mean, that's a beautiful insight. I love it, and I'm really interested by that. Do you find, because there's more uncertainty in the process of making a piece of music, that requires a bigger head of steam to be built up to go into it?
Well, it kind of does, because once, it's a thing where you go in that rabbit hole of production, and it takes a lot. I don't know how it is for other producers, man. It seems like they can like come out with tracks just not even thinking about it. I hear other producers, and it's like their sketches are hits. Like it seems like you're listening to it and it's like, wow, this is like their sketch and this is hot. You know what I mean? But see, it doesn't come so easy for me. And then once you get into that rabbit hole, it takes so much out of you, because you're in the zone for like a week sometimes, like doing a good track, and lose track of, lose all track of time. You don't eat, that sort of thing. So I have these big, so basically I have these big chunks of time where I do that, but then I take breaks in between those chunks of time, because it takes you're really going into it, and you're trying every sound. You're trying to, well, maybe this will sound like this, or then you go into the arrangement, and you go through 3 or 4 different arrangements. So there's a lot that goes into production for me that is not so, it's not so heavy when you're doing art. It's a whole different thing.
It's got me wondering. I wonder whether we might sit down with someone else who does the visual art side of things, and they say, "Oh, well, it's all right for you, Alan, because you just think of what it is and it comes out. I have to do like 6 or 7 different sketches before the idea properly forms." I wonder if that's. I imagine that would be true, that we would hear that, and that's got me interested about how different people who have the multidisciplinary background approach different types of art. Because coming into this interview with you, I was kind of expecting you'd have quite a similar process for both. So it's been really enlightening to hear the differences.
Yeah, most people think that these things are intertwined, but they're not. It's 2 separate sides of the brain working, pretty much.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned that you might do a couple of different arrangements. So go into the studio with an idea or just to play around, listen to what the music's telling you. You're getting, you wanted it to sound like that, or you expected it, and something different comes out. You get the melting pot of ideas. Before you go into the arrangement, what would I see in your DAW? What would be there?
Well, the first thing is if I were to open up my DAW, and it would be every element, that's basically how I work it, is that because I work primarily in Machine. I do some stuff in Ableton, but primarily in Machine. But basically, I would have one pattern with every element in it already, like everything the way I want it to sound. And what I would do at that point is you duplicate the patterns, but then you delete. You're basically doing a mix, and you're deleting elements and adding elements. And at the end and then you place these patterns one after the other. And then when you press play, then it just plays every pattern all the way through with all of the changes that you program into it. When I first started in the box, I had a Machine Micro. That's what I first started with. And with Machine Micro, I was doing live mix downs to Audacity, where you would just basically, you're doing a live set, and that's your track, and you're using mutes and taking stuff in and out. But when I moved up to Machine Mark III, you can automate a lot of stuff, and I kind of got into automation. But when you open it up, all the elements are there, and it's a matter of either adding or subtracting those elements within the track. Like, let's just say you want to make a breakdown, you want to do a build up, you want to make a big comeback section where all the elements are in the track, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of, it's hard to really verbally explain it, but that's kind of how I do it.
So you're making a bunch of different patterns in Machine, get those all into the DAW now, is that right? Yep. And then once that's all mapped out, then it's the game of subtracting and adding as you feel it. Yeah, I totally get that. And I'm imagining that is obviously you're getting the groove and stuff in, but also your DJ head comes into play, because you've been DJing for a long time, totally know how you want the music to work and what's going to work on the dance floor. I imagine those instincts are coming in quite strongly at that point as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you can imagine what a crowd would do if this track was playing in front of them while you're making the music. And you're like, okay, well, we're going to do this super long breakdown and super long build up and that sort of thing. And a lot of it works. You know, back when there were shows. And, but yeah, a lot of it works. But definitely, you know, I taught a class last fall, and one of the guys at the school was like, you know, this is that all you make, is, you know, kind of like dance floor stuff? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a DJ, you know, because this guy's kind of the warp IDM, all techer, plaid type dude.
Oh,
And
Tekka, that take you to some strange places listening to their
yeah,
records.
but I'm more of a direct DJ. So, and then when the funny thing about me is that when I do make stuff that's kind of non 4/4, nobody even really pays attention to it. So I just make dance floor type stuff.
And what I picked up on there is that a lot of the times what you envisage working in the studio does exactly what you expect it to do when it gets to the dance floor.
Right.
Right. And do you find yourself going back and tweaking things like the mix and things like that?
Always. That when I moved in the box, you know, I had a whole physical studio when I lived in the States. And one of the things about it was that, I mean, and it was not a software studio. I had a hard sequencer and everything. But one of the things was, once the track was finished, it was finished. You know, like once you finish the track, and then you go in and you set, your machines have different settings, and the track that you did was completely obliterated. So you couldn't go in and fix tracks anymore. Like they were just, and then you would record you'd record 2 tracks to Audacity. So you didn't have stems. That was the way I used to do it, you know. But then I moved in the box, and then you can go back and find your old tracks, retweak, you know, re-EQ, rearrange anything. So that was one of the great things that I discovered when I kind of started doing stuff on computer.
Sure. So there's a bit of a trade-off there though as well, isn't there? Because you've got this the serendipity of having the hardware, and once it's done, and I can't go back in and play around with that and mess about with that and keep going into the details. Whereas now the luxury of that, I'm wondering, it may not be a trade-off for you, but a lot of people find themselves just keep going back when maybe it's probably time to move on. Or certainly one of the things I find is often too much doing that. I then go back to a previous version and go, well, that was way better what I had before. And I've spent hours and hours and hours with this luxury that turns out to have been, as I say, like the double-edged sword. Do you experience that?
Well, you know what? I don't mess with stuff too much after I'm done with it. I mean, especially if it's for another label. I mean, it's kind of once you deliver the masters, that's pretty much it. There was a remix that I did a couple years ago that I went back and redid just for my own use. But you know that I try to keep things things in focus. You know, I don't like to go down too many rabbit holes. And you know, you see these guys, they spend 1 week on a kick, you know, or a clap. Oh, I spent a week on this clap. You know, I'm not that guy, really. I really want to just get stuff finished.
Get it done and ship it. So it can be a building up the head of steam to get started, but once you're in it, that you're in it and you're getting a job done.
All the way to the end, correct.
Yeah, love it. So you mentioned obviously back in the States and the setup you had there, you know, from Detroit to Berlin. What got you making the move?
I came here for the work. I mean, that's really the simplest answer. I came here. This is where the scene is. This is where the industry is. And you know, eventually, if you want to remain relevant in the game, I mean, you have to be here. You know, it's like if you're an actor, you move to Hollywood. You know, if you're a DJ, you move to Berlin. I mean, then this is where Native Instruments is. This is where Ableton is. This is where Resident Advisor is. SoundCloud. You know, the whole industry's here. And then also, it's a big city for art and visuals, performance art. You know, all kinds of creativity is happening here. Architecture, just all kinds of design, all kinds of everything. Well, you know, of course, I'm speaking pre-pandemic, but yeah, everything is really going on here creatively, and you know, it wasn't so much in the States. And you know, I'm always quick to point out. I mean, when I left America, Obama was still president. So it's not like Trump got elected and I ran to Europe. I mean, it was still relatively normal when I left. But I just, you know, but I came here for the work. And here's the funny thing about it. So I was here a year, okay? And this is what's hilarious. So I played this gig here in Berlin. It's a Wednesday night party at a club here in Berlin. I went in, played the gig. I played a 3-hour set. I came out, you know, finished my set and everything. I came out, it was daytime, and Brexit had happened while I was on the decks. That's literally what happened. Like, you know, Britain was normal when I went on. And then by the time I finished, Brexit had happened. And then Trump happened like right around that same time in a couple months. So this is maybe 2016 or something. So yeah, as soon as I left the States, everything just, so, you know.
Everything went downhill.
Pretty much. But I'm always quick to point out that I just came here for the work and to be closer to the industry. And it wasn't anything political that led me to come here. It was nothing going. I was living in Chicago right before I came here. There was nothing going on. So you just had to come where the work was, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. You just touched on sort of all the architecture and all of these things. I mean, I love Berlin. That's one of the things I particularly like about it, actually. But how has the move from the US to Berlin affected your creativity?
It's like a just a this steroid shot, you know, because here you are, well, basically here you are surrounded by a lot of supportive people. That's like kind of the number one thing. It's just a lot of supportive people, you know, an atmosphere that is very conducive to creativity. And it's kind of that spirit here where you could just do anything you want, you know. I put together my own art shows here. You know, I have kind of my own gallery shows or my own kind of underground art shows. And you could do that here and people will show up, you know. I mean, you try to do that at other places and it's like 50-50 or 60-40 if nobody shows up, you know. But here it's just very open and very supportive. And it gives you the kind of wherewithal and motivation to do stuff. You know, like if you're in the States trying to do stuff and you just kind of beating your head against the wall and you lose motivation, it's like, who cares? You know, I do this stuff, nobody listens. I draw this stuff, nobody sees it. You know, and then you get kind of beat down. You know, and then it helps too that I'm completely, like, I'm unemployable by normal standards. So I couldn't have made a living in America, you know, at all anyway. You know, so that was basically the difference between the States and being here in Germany, is that it's just conducive, and there's so many people that are doing what you're doing. Everybody's hustling. It's a lot of good energy. You know, somebody's doing a fashion show, somebody's doing an art show, somebody is having a premiere. You know, we have the Berlin Film Festival here every year. It's a lot of good films. Just so much going on, and everything's so continental. It's just, and I really like it here. Just the creative aspect, you know, just that's basically the difference in my opinion.
Yeah, I can see how lit up
Yeah.
you are by it. It's awesome. Did you already know people in Berlin when you moved there, or have you just built your network pretty much from scratch?
My advantage, I've been coming back and forth to Berlin for 20 years. I think the first time I came to Berlin was in '95. I played a May Day, one of the West Band parties. It was like me and the great Luke Slater That's where I met him, and we played that show, and that was in '95. And then I came back in '97 when I got signed to Tresor, and that's when I started playing the old club. And I would come back and forth to play shows, and the stays would be longer and longer, and it would be a situation where I would set up some shows when I was living in Chicago. I'd set up some shows, and then you fly over, and then you play. You could stay for 3 months on your U.S. passport, and I'd play a bunch of shows and go back, and the stays kept getting longer and longer, and then finally I got gentrified out of my apartment. I was living in Chicago. I was living in Logan Square, and finally got gentrified out. And I was on my way over anyway, because I had a ticket bought and I had gigs already. And then my ex-fiance is like, you should try to just stay, because that's where the work is. And there was a guy that I knew who got a visa, and he apparently walked into this place and just got it. And I'm like, okay, I'm more famous than this guy, and it was easy for him. So I marched in there, and sure enough, I was able to get one. And I've been here ever since, really. This is I came here October 2014 to stay. And I've been here ever since, really. So that's how that went.
And as you mentioned, it's a real sort of melting pot for creatives. Do you collaborate a lot with people?
You know what? I was asked that. I was asked that before, and I really don't. I'm really kind of my own man, really. It's kind of it's just a throwback from Detroit, because in Detroit everybody did their own thing and hardly anybody collaborated on anything. I mean, in terms of remixes and trading hits and stems back and forth, a remix is one thing, but to actually be in the studio and do stuff with other people, it's you're in somebody else's studio and you don't really know how they do stuff, and in the time it takes for you to learn somebody else's stuff, you could have finished the track on your own. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's hard to get out of that mindset.
So creativity is more of a personal thing for you.
Well, for me it is. I mean, I want to like work with people, and then too, everybody's scrambling also, so it's not a whole lot of time to do collabs, because everybody's hustling, man. It's like, especially now in the pandemic time, everybody's doing remixes and making tracks and trying to pay bills and that sort of thing. So it's not a whole lot of free time to just kind of vibe with somebody and do something, like do a collab. So, I mean, I don't know. A lot of people make it work, but for me, I'm more of a lone gunman, I suppose.
Talking about the pandemic, how obviously with a side of the gigs and all of that stuff, how has that affected your creativity?
I hate to say it. So many people are really, really hurting over this thing, and it's really nothing to sneeze at, really. But I mean, it's helped me a lot, because now that I'm off the road, because so much of it is either hustling for gigs or playing gigs. Like when you're not actually playing, you're hustling for the next one. See what I mean? And then you're trying to get like, so you're into a track and you're super into it and you've been working on it, and you work on it from Monday to Thursday. Then Friday comes and the gig is on Saturday, so you got to get your set together, you got to do that. So it takes you out of the mindset of the track. And now you have to shift gears into a gig mindset where you're putting together your music, you trying to do a good set, you have to go to the airport, you have to do all this stuff, flying. And then you come back on the Sunday night, you're exhausted, you take Monday off, you get back in Tuesday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then all over again, But the pandemic shut everything down to the point where you could just be you and your studio and your machines, and you can just do you can really make something quality that you really want it to be, you know, as opposed to making kind of compromises and shortcuts and, oh, that sounds okay. We'll fix that. We'll fix that in post. You know what I mean? Like now you can really uh, uh, just drill down and do all your details and stuff. So that's what's been, and you don't have to be anywhere, and you could just create, and that's what's been good for me
It's,
in
I mean,
terms
it's,
of.
yeah, interesting that you say that, because we've found a lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of pros are saying exactly the same thing. But also in our community, we've seen a lot of people thriving, I think, because they don't have as many external commitments. I know, as you said, for a lot of people, it's been the other way and it's been harder. A lot of stay-at-home parents and things have found things more difficult, but a lot of people have just found they've got more time and they're more able to focus with less distractions as a result of it. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's great to hear your take on that. Thank you. The other thing that you mentioned just a little while ago that I picked up on was around moving to Berlin, because that's where the work is, that's the things that's happening. And I remember you saying on an interview, I'm probably going to butcher how this is pronounced. It's HOR with the little things
Hmm.
over the top. Is it
Yeah.
Hor? Something
Yeah.
like that?
You might as well
Right.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's as
Or.
good as you're going to get from me. And you mentioned about some of the people who've had longer careers and who are around at the beginning doing well, not adapting and thinking they'll just get by on reputation and legacy alone. Obviously, you've moved, but there's the whole online piece and all of these things. How have you felt? Or what have you done to adapt that's enabled you to stay at the top of the game as you have?
Well, I mean, I would. Well, I'd argue, you know, whether or not I'm top of the game or not. I mean, I don't know. It's many people levels above me.
Well, you've managed to maintain a career, which is a big
I'll say,
deal, you know.
I'll say that I managed to stay this relatively current. I say that about myself. I mean, I don't know. Well, you know what? The focus on the work. That's, to me, that's the number one thing. Is the focus on the work. See, because a lot of cats get involved in external stuff, and they comment on external stuff online. But it's, to me, it's about the work, man. It's about the tracks. You know, and it's about the tracks you're doing now. That's really, to me, that's kind of the number one thing. Is it's about what you're doing now. You know, I said it then. There's a lot of guys from the '90s, and you know, they're like, well, I made this stuff in the '90s. Why am I not getting booked? I'm a legend. But you know, it's about the work. It's about the new tracks. It's about the new stuff, and keeping them. You know, I keep my ear to the ground as far as a lot of the younger artists as well. You know, and you kind of have to be open to that new breed. You know, I notice, you know, here in Berlin, I run into a lot of the younger cats, and you know, I'm pretty much open to them. You know what I mean? A lot of people are not open to them. You know, what is that? That's not really techno. That's not how we did it. Who are these people? You know, but you kind of have to, you know, if you're gonna, you know, at the end of the day, whether you want to be or not, you're an elder in the scene, and your presence and your comportment, it leads the way for people, even if you don't want it to. You know what I mean? Like you may not think it does, but people are watching. You know, and I feel as if you have to have a open mind to the younger kids. And you know, the funny thing about it too, when you talk to a lot of these younger producers and DJs, they want the guidance. You know, it's not like they're saying, okay, boomer, get the shit out of get out of the way. Fuck you. You know, fuck you, boomer. You know, a lot of these people really want the mentorship and the guidance. They're looking for it. You know, I think, you know, a lot of us, you know, had absent parents and stuff, and people are kind of looking for that you know, in some surrogate, you know, even unconsciously. But I don't get a whole lot of the, hey man, fuck you, you don't know what you're talking about, you're an old guy. You know, I get, hey Alan, how did you do this? You know, what was it like back in Detroit back in the day? I mean, okay, so me as an artist, right? I used to romanticize when I lived in Detroit in the 80s. I was in college in the 80s. I used to romanticize what was going on in New York and London at that time. Because Warhol and Basquiat was happening in New York, and all this music was coming from England at that time. And we would just, me and my friends would just sit there with The Face or with Melody Maker and just be like, oh shit, what the hell, all this stuff. Susie and the Banshees is playing for like 10 pounds. Like you can go 10 pounds, you can go see Susie and the Banshees. And we're in Detroit, and it's like, wow, you know. And but then we used to romanticize that, but then when I speak to younger people now, they romanticize what we did, you know, in Detroit in the 80s, early 90s. Oh man, you were there. It was so great. I'm like, wow, really? You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm kind of meandering a little bit, but long story short, I feel that you just have to be open to the young generation, and you have to, you know, comport yourself as an elder, and there's just no room for this kind of bitterness or this kind of disdain for the youth or this kind of and focus on the work. That's like the number one thing. Focus on the work. No politics, no bullshit. Just stick with the work. You know.
Yeah, great. So it's the discipline, the work ethic. You know, if you want to stay, I say at the top because I know, as you say, okay, there may be people levels above you, you know, theoretically, if you like. But for me, the fact is, you've been a part of techno history, and you're staying a part, and that for me is a big deal. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and you've managed to maintain that by not resting on your laurels, but also by embracing the people and the music and the scene, just by moving for what it is now. So there's that fluidity, I guess, would be a good way of putting it. On that front, with the some of the newer artists coming out, is there anyone that you draw influences from at the moment? I know that you might draw an influence and still comes out Detroit, but I'm just wondering if there's sort of anyone that's firing you up at the minute.
No, seriously, man. Like these people on Instagram, they put these tracks up on Instagram, right? And I'm like with my phone and I'm listening to them. I'm like, man, I'm gonna make something like this. This is hot. This is hot. And it comes out sounding like me. But I don't know, who do I like right now? Who's killing it right now? There's this kid from New York, and he was living here in Berlin before the pandemic, but he moved back to New York. P. Leon, and he's on records. His stuff is really good. He's too good to be so young. I actually hate this kid. And,
the rest of them are all right, but he's.
And who else do I really like? Matrix Man is really good right now with the hypnotic techno. It just seems like a lot of people are taking that old time Jeff Mills Axis blueprint, and then they've just really taken it to their own next levels. But Matrix Man stuff is really good. Who else do I really like? There's this chick, Annika Wolf from LA, and she makes kind of like old school, like Chicago Jack track type stuff. Her stuff reminds me kind of like old DJ Sneak, other artists of that genre. Who else am I really into right now? Yeah, those are who comes to mind right now. I still lean. Too much, I might add, but I still lean on the old names a lot. And when I'm putting together my sets and when I'm going through tracks, I always lean on the old names, man. And I try not to. I try to bring in the younger names, but the old, the old dudes know how to make tracks. They know how to bang shit. Mark Broom, Fucking Broomy, man. This dude is a machine. Everything he makes is hot. Rob Hood, he never stops. Ben Sims, just the old British names. Surgeon, Regis, you know, those guys, they never fall off. Joey Beltram, when Joey makes new stuff, everything Joey makes is really, really good. Those kind of the old faithfuls.
So it's it's you're highlighting this word consistency as well. That's we're really getting that really strong undercurrent, which is great. What about the online stuff? So before we started, we brushed briefly on the fact that you've done some great streams with the DJing. What's your idea of balance, and how important do you see online these days if we stick to this theme of staying relevant?
Well, my philosophy, because when the pandemic hit, a lot of people saw it as the gold rush to get freebies. Like your inbox is like, do a podcast for me, do a podcast for me, do a podcast for me. And it was either people who never hit you up ever before in life, or my personal peeve is like clubs that never booked you, but yet they want a podcast now. But I think for me, like my personal policy for doing streams and podcasts is, if it's a club that booked me 2 years before the pandemic, if it's a good friend, like I've done streams for Christian Smith, Slam, like people like that, like guys I've known for like 20 years, and like if they want one, it's like, my management would recommend people to do podcasts for, and I respect that. But I don't want to do, and I did one for Advent, because he's doing the Techno Club site right now. I did one for Cisco. But again, I've known Cisco for 25 years, so if you're a good friend of that kind of standing, I would do it. If you're somebody who I've never heard of, I won't do it. I don't want to flood the zone with these mixes and streams though, because you want to still keep it special when you do it. So like I said before, in our pre-talk before we went on, is that I would rather do new stuff during this time, new tracks, new projects, than doing mixes just all over the place. Oh, and Horror, of course, they're like the biggest thing here in Berlin right now. So yeah, and then I did one for Dr. Rubenstein as well. That was really successful. So yeah, it really depends on who it is, but I really don't want to flood the zone with too much of it.
And I suppose there's one of the things that always strikes me, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, is, I remember way back when, talking about decades and decades ago, when there wasn't all of the internet side of things, there was something about DJs, just like there would be any kind of artist, there was like a mystique that surrounded them to some degree as well, which I used to love. Something that is lost now to some extent, when it's like I'm seeing someone who would have been an idol sitting down showing me what they're eating for breakfast or something every 5 minutes, Yeah. But I think like you're saying, there's a risk of you saturate too much online, and actually I want the magic of finding out about your music and what you're playing and what you're curating and discovering. Let's go and find that out in a live arena where you've designed it to be like that, in that club environment. What are your thoughts on that as a concept?
I mean, a lot of that, like you pointed out, a lot of that is gone now, because the whole shift is social media. I'm like you. I used to get these import records, and there were no photos, or they were white labels, and you didn't know who these people were. and the stuff was really, really good. But a lot of the mystique, as you pointed out, is kind of a thing of the past. And if you are an artist who wants to remain relevant, the game now is social media, particularly Instagram, you know, and that's the realization, you know. The older artists who are still successful have embraced this new paradigm, you know. I mean, we are all kind of mature dudes. You remember when records used to come into the record shop, you know, on Thursday, Friday, and you know, this like, wow, what is this? But you got to understand, I mean, a lot of people, there are whole generations who don't know that whole, who were just not even there for that. You know, I'm reading online, and there were kids, there were people talking about when they were kids, they used Napster and LimeWire or LimeWire. That was the big thing when they were a kid. LimeWire. When they were a kid, LimeWire already. See what I mean? So they weren't at a store waiting for the vinyl to come in. You know, they don't know anything about that. But we have to remain on point with the times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take us too far off track, but I do like reminiscing about this stuff as well because,
oh, absolutely,
you know, that idea. I remember, you know, coming back from a party and I'd be exhausted, but I'd be like, there's only one place I'm going, and it's the record shop, and I'm going to be
right.
in there for hours, hanging out. I know the guys, I probably know the other people who are in there buying vinyl, and it's like, what's this thing and what's that thing, and there wasn't the benefit of the SoundCloud set where someone would say track ID please, oh it's this one. That just wasn't a thing, and a lot of the tracks that you would go to hear DJs because they might play a couple of pieces of vinyl that nobody else in the city had, and it was just, it's this one, man, I'd love to be able to find this track. I'm sorry, that ain't going to happen in a hurry. So right. you could find those like hidden gems and things. And yeah, I mean, I too miss that. There's a load of beautiful advantages about where we are at the moment, but just sort of taking that trip down memory lane. And you're right, a lot of people won't have experienced that. There's like a Beatport Top 100 and things like that. And you got to dig and dig and dig to try and find something a little bit more obscure these days if you're only getting your tracks online.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. So let's wrap this up. It's been amazing. Thank you. I absolutely loved sort of the trip down memory lane, but also the talking about the, you know, your different the different types of art and staying relevant and your influences and your moving and the professionalism, consistency, just such incredible messages. Thank you. If we sort of stay on this, the younger generation thing, and you mentioned about sort of helping them these days, if you had the killer piece of advice that you think would really benefit them, or even the one thing you wish you were told at the start that would have accelerated things or, you know, helped you out. And if it needs to be more than one, because I'm putting you in a box, or if you're like, I can't think of anything, bugger off, that's cool as well. But if there is something that's in your mind that you could share, I'd love to end on that note.
Okay. Well, it's a couple of things. If my current self could go back maybe 20 years, I would tell my younger self to save my money more. That's like the number one thing. Save your money. It doesn't even really matter at what point you decide to save your money, but you must save your money, because 5 years from now you'll be happy that you saved your money. So that's like always the number one thing. My whole thing to any younger artist or anything, especially these days, it's easy to become disenchanted, or it's easy to become just kind of like, oh, you know, nobody cares, you know. There was this guy on Twitter that was basically saying that, you know, like anything he makes doesn't matter because nobody listens to it. But I kind of chimed in. I'm like, you know, they'll catch up to you, you know, but you have to make the stuff. I mean, there's tracks that I made 20 years ago that people are just now, I mean, that I thought were flops, right? Didn't, you know, got a bunch of returns, tried to do it and it didn't work, but people are finding them. You know, so I think the people will catch up. So I think that when you feel down and when you feel like nobody's listening, continue with the work, man. Because that's the work is the therapy, number one. That's that the work is the therapy. But people will discover you. But the work, you have to do the work first. And that's kind of how I feel about it. Don't stop. And you know, especially people who are in places that are not particularly creative. You know, like we're all freaks, and we were born in places that, you know, wasn't really feeling what we were doing, or, you know, but the work is the therapy, and just focus on whatever it is, you know, your art, your music, your whatever expression you're writing. I was talking to a friend of mine online about about writing a book, and oh, Alan, it's hard to write a book. You know, I mean, he was talking to me. It's like, you're good with storytelling, you do comics, but a lot of people can't do that. I'm like, hey man, all you have to do is write. Just start, and you can fix it later. You can tweak it later. You can edit it later, but just start. Anything, start. Just start. That's all. You know, it's no big secret. Start and don't stop. I mean, I started 30 years ago when I was with UR, and I haven't stopped. And it helps too, because I didn't have a whole bunch of opportunities to get out. You know, like, it's not like, well, you know, I got a great job opportunity and I'm going to dump all this music shit because I got this great thing and I'm just going to dump this now. So that never happened for me. So it was this or nothing. So I would tell anyone that you do the work and just remain focused and don't get caught up in external shit. Make good choices. You know, especially the babies, you know, the young people that make good choices. Holy shit. You know, because so many people make bad choices and then now they're screwed. You know, they made bad choices at 19 and now they're 35 and they're screwed. Don't, you know, just really be mindful. Because it's not like it was when I was young. When I was younger, you could fuck up. But the margin for error is so slim for young people now. So that's what that would be my fatherly advice.
Fatherly advice.
to people. Just be focused, stick with your plan. Don't let anybody knock you off your square. And just, you know, do the work, because the work is the therapy, and just keep pushing.
I love that. I love the do the work, and the work is the therapy as well. And that's really true, because there are lots of different types of creative anxiety, but one of them is not doing the work, is not expressing yourself. That builds up an anxiety that a lot of people think is a sign to like, oh god, that's a big deal, but actually it's the screaming inside of you to get started. It's a mixed message here. It's the do it, and that's the release. Is the tension will be released when you do the work.
Absolutely, and it'll take care of itself in the end, because in the end you'll have an EP, you'll have an album, you'll have a book, you'll have paintings, you'll have comics, you'll have, in the end, you'll have something, and that puts you ahead of most people. You know, oh, I got this thing. You know, when I used to do comics, you know, back in the '80s, I did comics and I got published, and a lot of my peers were kind of like, "Oh, your comics suck." I'm like, "No, my comic is on sale." You know?
Yeah. Oh wow, I love it. That's so good. So, how cool is that?
It's the truth, you know. And then like, my comic is on sale, you know. So that's basically, that's the win. But you can't get there if you don't do the work. So
that is so good. I got to write that down. Yeah. You know, your comics suck. No, my comics are on sale.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That screams it. What a great message. Okay. Well, let's put a line under it on that note.
All
It's
right.
perfect. It's really profound. But I'd love to hear what have you got coming up? Where can we if it's not a live stream, maybe it's a track coming out. Where can we keep on top
All
of
right,
things?
here we go. Live stream. Let's see. I just did 2. Oh yeah, no, I got a stream coming up for Slam that comes out on April 1st. Hour-long stream, and that's on Slam's SoundCloud. I'm working on tracks, but nothing near coming out right now. I'm really in the middle of making a bunch of stuff. I'm actually working on an album, but that won't be out till next year or maybe even the year after. But I'm working on an album for a particular Belgian label.
Cool.
I'm 5 tracks into that. I'm doing another EP for BPitch. I'm working on that. I'm in the middle of everything right now, so nothing is about to come out. But just keeping busy. Let's see, I got another mix coming out too, but I can't remember where it is. Anyway, Slam.
So Slam 1st of April, you said, right?
That's right, on their SoundCloud.
1st of April on their SoundCloud, and then we've got something on BPitch coming out. That's exciting, and then an album. Just quickly with the album, is it going to be all sort of beats driven, or are you going off into any other sort of styles or textures in there?
Absolutely, I'm definitely doing some down tempo experiments. We mentioned Autechre before. I've been listening back to them and Plaid of late. So we're going to get into a little bit of that. One of the things about producing music now during the pandemic is that it doesn't really have to be, dance floor driven now because there's no dance floors. But it's going to be a couple bangers on there, and it's going to be some experimental tracks, and maybe a vocal track, just a variety. These guys want me to do a comic book to go along with it. It's going to be a big deal when it's finished. So I'm just steadily working on that. Man,
that is exciting. Well, I cannot wait. I shall be keeping my eyes peeled for when that drops, because you've got your, to have the comic book with, again, which is one of these things, used to get a record with a sleeve or a CD with an inlay and all of those things. So I love the fact that there's another piece of art that's coming with it, and there's the variety. So yeah, that sounds great. And a quick reminder for everyone again, Slam SoundCloud, 1st of April, brand new DJ mix, super exciting stuff. Well, all it leaves me to say is a huge thank you. I really appreciate you coming on, and you shared some, a few of the things you said are those kind of moments that really resound from the work, and the work is a therapy. And the thing about the comic books as well, sometimes it just takes those little one-liners, I think, and people just have light bulb moments, and it unlocks creative blocks and all of those things. So I know that some of the kind of small, what might have almost felt like a throwaway one-liner in the moment will be really profound and impact people, and certainly I'm taking some of those away. I've scribbled them down, and that's what I'm doing here with the iPad. Is there's a few things, and I'm like, yeah, I love that. That will help me as well. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Very honored. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Alan. Take care, buddy.
Thanks. Bye.